Welcome to AlphaCars Service Center. My name is Dimitri, and together we're going to check out some interesting work we're doing on this G55 Grand Edition. This is something very common we run into here in New England, rust repairs. We're very good at it, and we developed some very efficient, both cost efficient, time efficient, and just efficient all around techniques how to deal with the rust, how to prevent rust from developing in certain common areas, and if the rust has developed already, how to deal with it. So let's check it out together. We're going to start with looking at the rocker panels first. And you can see these holes, number one. These holes are mounting holes for the heavy-duty rocker panel molding. It's big, it's wide, and it hides a lot of the rust development under it. So definitely should be removed, and things should be inspected. On a lot of the G-Class of this vintage, certainly vehicles from New England area, you're going to see some rust starting, and hopefully you can catch it early enough and deal with it, and clean it, treat it, protect it, and then reinstall the moldings. Also, you would need to pay attention to these overlap joints. One like this, that's from the C-pillar. One like this, which is vertical one between the two sections of the rocker panel. And there are ones further down. So the rust would travel underneath or from the joint out. It doesn't matter how the rust gets started. What's important is how to stop it. So obviously you need to grind off all the rust, and then in the cavities inside, what we do, we use a rust converter. There are a number of rust converter products. The one that we use, we would let it work on the surface for as many as 72 hours, and then after that we will grind it to make sure it's penetrated through the rust, and usually it is, and then we can apply the protective coatings. So the purpose of this video is actually help you identify the areas where the rust may be originating. And under the rocker panels, very, very common on the G-Class of this vintage. Also, when you go to reinstall the rocker panels, make sure that none of these holes are recessed. Sometimes you will find them that the actual area is dipped in. So you need to pull this out and make sure it is in the same plane as the rest of the rocker panel. Often, and this is another example here, you'll find that the rust is actually traveling to the underneath of the rocker panel. At that point, you would have to, and we will recommend on this vehicle, to remove the running board. And it's not such a big deal on this one. There's some rusted hardware. We may have to cut and replace it with new, but that's something that is going to be extremely beneficial on this vehicle, because that would allow us to clean the rust off underneath, treat it, and protect it. Another area that you need to pay attention to are these flares. And they're pretty, they're awesome looking on the AMG variants. They're wider by a couple of inches, but it doesn't matter if it's the AMG variant or the regular G500 or G550. Pull back on these and you will see, like right here, you're going to see some rust developing on the body of the vehicle from exposed metal. And the reason metal is exposed because the seal is rubbing against the metal and eventually wearing through the paint primer and getting the metal exposed. So we will recommend to remove the flare, inspect it. There will be a number of areas, this is just one of them, where the metal will be exposed. So we will clean it, touch it up, again, prime it, touch it up, and then we can install a clear protective paint protection film strip, or sometimes having no rubber seal is better than having it. So that's also an option. You can see here that another shop or maybe vehicle owner applied some touch-up, and it may feel good to the person doing it because you feel like you're protecting it, but actually unless the rust is completely removed, it can make things even worse. So we will be recommending to clean this area, expose the rusted area, clean it, treat it, and then obviously we can touch it up. As far as touch-up, we can achieve the same level of protection as painting the whole panel. And here, yes, you would paint, you really need to paint the upper portion of the fender, which adds a pretty significant layer of cost. But still, given the age of these vehicles, doing touch-up it's a good option, it's a valid option. Also, we have done complete repaints where we took all the parts off, everything would come off. We would expose all the rust, would grind it, and of course, then you'd be refinishing the whole vehicle, and that's a completely different cost structure, and it gets a lot more expensive. So these are just a couple of examples, and then of course, we would go around the vehicle, and you're going to see areas, this rubber gasket already rubbed through into the metal, and it's been exposed for a while, so you can see the rust spiders spreading out. There's a rust here, and there are multiple areas you can see on this vehicle that the rust is getting to it. A very common area around the windshield, you can see this gasket. You would definitely want to pull that up in the lower section from this corner to the opposite side corner. You can pull it up and peek inside and make sure there's no rust. Unfortunately, most likely on the vehicles in New England, you are going to find the rust. And a common, well, depending on the extent of the rust, the windshield may have to come out, and often it will break, and then you have to put a new windshield. So that's a pretty serious cost. If the rust is not bad, it can be dealt with with the gasket pulled up, cleaned, and then we would also feed that area underneath this gasket right here. We can feed it with penetrating oil from the top down. This is something we actually highly recommend on vehicles that have not developed rust. And there's a treatment we can do where we can feed that penetrating oil and literally eliminate the possibility of the rust development. Yeah, I wish we have seen all these vehicles early on when they did not develop rust. But we have seen things much worse than this, and where you see little green tape, that's where the rust areas are on this vehicle. That's on the painted parts, exterior of the vehicle. As far as the frame, for example, on this one, it's actually not in bad shape. Minimal scaling on the frame, and the common areas we inspect are the upper rear shock mounts, and this one is still good and healthy, but you can see where things start to develop is this pocket. So there's the upper shell, which is this one right here, and there's a bottom reinforcement plate. They create a pocket inside where moisture and dirt gets trapped, and eventually it causes rust damage to this frame tube, which is part of the frame of the vehicle, and the bracket would be rusted completely and it would fall off. So you definitely want to keep an eye on it. And what we do, and we will recommend it for this vehicle, we will drill access holes right here, and we will clean out all the dirt, and we will fill it with penetrating oil inside. Obviously, any rust like this would be cleaned, treated, and fed with penetrating oil. We would do it throughout the whole underbody parts. And this will substantially extend the life of this vehicle it would retain the pleasant look of this gorgeous G class, and this particular one is the Grand Edition. Actually, I'm not sure if it's 04 or 05, but this was the time when Mercedes almost decided not to import them in the United States, and I think they even made that announcement, but then they continued to import them. But the Grand Edition supposedly represented the last production run for United States. Another common area where the aluminum would develop extensive corrosion, it would be these brackets. So you can see this bubbling, and that's something we can clearly treat. And we would take the mirror off the door, clean it, treat the area, make it smooth, refinish it. Sometimes we would do it flat black. It would look very nice. And yeah, this one is really bad. But again, it can all be done. Another common areas to keep an eye on are door hinges. And those could be literally just cleaned up and touched up. There are some other areas throughout the vehicle that we would keep an eye on as we maintain these G-Class for our customers. But most important thing is to catch the rust before it happens. And if it did happen, catch it before it spreads. So this vehicle is not bad. There are no holes that we have seen. It's on the surface. Some areas are worse than others, but it's all treatable. It is time consuming, but once it's done, it for the most part stops the rust. You always need to pay attention to those originally rusted areas and sometimes maintain it because, for example, in the seam like this, there's no way to get inside the seam, and unfortunately there's rust there. We use shaking and vibrating technique to get the most of it out, but still it may come through. To prevent any future rust developments from inside, what we do, we spray inside the rocker panel or any other enclosed areas. We spray again penetrating protective coatings. So that's about it on rust protection. This was on the G-Class. This actually applies to all vehicles. It just, the G-Class in the recent years gained a lot of added value on the market. So it definitely justifiable to spend the money and get them in shape with a lot of other vehicles. Say you have an older E-Class and Mercedes E-Class and it started to rust. You may find that it doesn't make sense unless there's a sentimental value for you to spend the money for rust repairs on such vehicles, but certainly on a G-Class. We are finishing all the work on this gorgeous G55, and the last step we're doing right now is pre-delivery complimentary cleaning. The car looks very, very nice, and we're giving it some final touches. I want to show you how the spare wheel cover came out on this vehicle. This is the one that had penetrating rust through on the bottom. It was completely gone, and we covered what happens to these. Basically, this strip, edge strip, rubs through the paint, exposes the metal, and then it starts to rust, and it keeps rusting until there are holes. So we did a complete repair. We used epoxy material to reconstruct the shape and integrity of this part. We also used a chip guard on the, you can see right here, we used the chip guard on the perimeter edge, and then we refinished the whole part, so it is now much better protected. And as you can see, this vehicle came out really, really nice. There was a dramatic amount of work that was done. The rust was shooting from under all the moldings, pretty much all the typical spots, the hinges, all 4 hinges on the side and the back hinge, they were all rusting, a lot of rust in different areas. So we cleaned it, we treated it, and we used the touch-up, so there was no body shop work done on this vehicle, and still it looks awesome and very, very presentable. So thank you very much for viewing this video from AlphaCars Service Center. My name is Dimitri, and please mark the videos you like. Simply click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.